Hi guys, today I want to share my story on how I went from being 10 to 15 grand in debt to starting, founding, growing a video agency that was earning $500,000 per year by the time that I sold it. And that's a span of about 10 years, 8, 9 years. I think it's quite an interesting story. I learned a shitload in that time. Hopefully I can relay some of that value and information onto you. And this was the company, Afterworks. They're still going now. I sold my company to Dan, my business partner, the guy I founded the company with. Dan's a great guy. He's still running the company now. They're doing amazing things. I just wanted to do something different. I wanted to have a bit more fulfillment, and I found that, I think, through coaching. So if we rewind right back to the start, I had a plethora of jobs growing up. My first one, when I was 16, I worked at Pizza Hut, £3.64 an hour. 10-hour shifts, no breaks. Did not realize it was illegal at the time because I was 16, and in the UK we have a saying wet behind the ears, which means you don't really know what the fuck's going on half the time. um, did that job for about a year, moved into another role where I was a waiter at a fancy restaurant. Then I did inbound call center, uh, and then I did another inbound call center. Hated that. Then I worked for the police for about a year and a half I worked in their control room. So I used to take 999 or 911 calls, radio dispatch, stuff like that. And having a World of Warcraft background, my touch typing was like 180 words per minute. So I was a bit of a whiz kid. I had that role, but the night shifts were fucking horrible and the culture was awful. Um, Left there, went to work in marketing for Havas Helio, one of the biggest marketing companies in the world. Did that for a year. Actually quite enjoyed that, but the pay was shit. Um, Left there, went into IT support, did IT support for a year, and around the same sort of time that I started the IT support role, I started Otter with Dan. A year later, I leave the IT support role to go full time in Otter, and I think it's important to kind of reflect on these moments and explain like where my head was at about taking the leaps, especially leaps like this, because they're not easy. As a 21-year-old, 22-year-old at the time, starting a video company when I knew fucking nothing about cameras was ridiculous. Like, I'd be insane to think that, right? But I had just had enough of the 9 to 5 bullshit and mainly shit managers who would just stab you in the back at any chance they got to increase their own status. And I realized that I don't want to work under people like this. And more importantly, I didn't want to become someone like that. And like, I think I recognize, us as humans, we're very susceptible to our environments and the people we hang around with most. And if I was going to hang out with dickheads all the time, inevitably I was going to turn into some sort of a dickhead. And I didn't want that to happen. Um, and I had tried side hustles and stuff. I got like Google SEO certified back in the day, which is like Google exams. So you can actually like teach Google certification, but I found it really fucking boring. I did drop shipping for like 2 weeks. Touched loads of other stuff, dried it out, put it down. Nothing really stuck. And then I found a guy on YouTube called Casey Neistat. And I think I found him at like 11 p.m. at night. And I did an all-nighter. I watched every single one of his New York vlogs. I was just so incredibly inspired by him. And I hadn't been that inspired for probably 2 years prior when I read a book called The Laptop Millionaire, which a friend of mine, Matt, gave me. And that's the first time back then I'd ever really considered being an entrepreneur or business owner. I just had no way or idea of knowing what to do or how to do it. Um, but it planted the seed in my brain. And then fast forward back to Casey Neistat, seeing what he's doing with his cameras, seeing the content he's making, and I guess also the views as well. But I was more just inspired by his life, what he was getting to do day to day. It was just amazing. And that morning, after being out all night, I literally went out to Curry's and I bought a Canon G7X G-Shot, whatever it was. It was like a small little pocket DSLR, not even a DSLR. It was like a point and shoot camera. And then I came back and I went for a run. That's 7 in the morning on no sleep, just fueled on admiration and motivation and inspiration, and that's what led to this. And then I was like, fuck, man, I want to start a video company. And I had this idea of going down to South France and renting out some fucking nice car and just making some sort of commercial. And I literally didn't know what like a 12mm lens was. I didn't know what an EF mount was. I didn't know lighting. I didn't know how drones worked. I literally knew fuck all about cameras. And I started a video company because what I did is I thought, who do I know that knows cameras really well? Dan. Dan's a friend from school, but we weren't really that close at school. We weren't really enemies, but we didn't really hang out. But we kind of came a little bit closer because of our acquaintance, Matt, who we were both friends with. And so me and Dan hung out a bit more. And I knew Dan was really into cameras. So I was like, I proposed that me and Dan go for a coffee, and I kind of wanted to make like a proposition to him. And what I was going to propose was like, dude, I'm going to rent out a car and we're going to drive it down to South France. You shoot the whole thing and I'll give you like 250 quid. Right. That was like the idea in my head of like, cool, I can leverage Dan's skills, pay Dan, he can shoot it. I get to drive a nice car and the video will go viral and I'll start a massive company. I'll be fucking the new Casey Neistat. And I got into Costa to meet Dan. We started chatting about the whole thing. Dan's eyes light up like he's super inspired, like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing. And I quickly realized after having a 5 to 10 minute conversation with Dan, like, oh shit, I should be paying Dan 250. I should make him a partner. Like he knows everything that I don't. And I know a lot of the shit that he doesn't in that sense. So it kind of just felt a very natural, like, click. So that's kind of what we did. And we just started doing random videos and we started shooting events and stuff like that, all for free. We had no idea what we were doing. Dan was working as a graphic designer at the time. I was working in IT support. And it's crazy to look back on now and think about all the shit that we did and the way that we grew in the weirdest of ways, both as friends, as people, as business owners. And I look back at those times extremely fondly because like growing Otter with Dan was such a fun experience. We had no idea what the fuck we were doing half the time. Anyway, me and Dan have been doing this a few months and I think I just turned vegan. I'm not anymore. I think I just turned vegan and me and Dan had like gone out on the lash and got pretty drunk. And then there was the Swindon half marathon the next day. And we had like been in touch with the guy, like, oh, we'll film it for free. We just kind of wanted to do work, all this sort of stuff. And the guy just kind of gave us the run of the mill and just like, oh, we got a videographer, we don't want your help, blah, 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 blah. We were like, okay. We woke up that morning pretty hungover and we were like, fuck it, should we just film it anyway? So we did. We filmed the half marathon. And we got back to the office at like 4 p.m. We basically edited it and then I put it onto Facebook. I chucked like 8 quid behind it to boost it. And it went viral in our hometown of Swindon. I think it got like 35,000 views in 24 hours, which back then was insane for Facebook, and especially with an ad spend as little as 8 quid. And it just went viral. And we realized, okay, there's a metric here where turning stuff around that quickly, like same day edit, and then we put in the description like, oh, tag your friends who are in the run, whatever. And it just like the engagement went crazy. And before we knew it, we had like 4 or 5 businesses DMing us from our website asking for video work. And we were like, oh shit. Okay. And we realized a very valuable lesson that we kind of built the company on, which is speed. Like as an entrepreneur, your best asset is speed. It's the thing that's going to differentiate you between everyone else. Because if you could deliver quality at speed, you are very fucking valuable. Because a lot of people, a lot of clients are just really, really impatient. And if you can solve that issue of just like saying, yeah, I can get that to you at this time, at this day, and you deliver and it's still really good, it doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter as much about the price. It doesn't matter as much about the quality because the client just fucking wants it, right? They just want it and they want to use it. So that kind of happened. We started getting more and more jobs, £250 here, £200 there. And we had like, I think in that first year, Otter had made 10 or 12 grand. We were both still working our full-time jobs. We were taking time off work, calling sick at work. One of my managers found out and contacted the client to ask if I'd been at a shoot. And luckily that client was really sweet and said, no, I don't know who Ben is. Kat, if you're watching this, thank you. And yeah, we started doing more and more work, really random, sporadic work, like music videos for hospitals through to train namings for like one of the biggest train lines in the country, GWR. And it just kind of grew organically really well. Like most companies do at the start when you don't really know what the fuck you're doing. And we started Otter on February the 9th, 2017. Fast forward to December, um, the crypto was having its first ever boom, really before anyone got into crypto. I only got into it because of a colleague of mine who ended up becoming a crypto millionaire, ironically, and quitting his job. But anyway, I think in that time span, I'd made, I don't know, 16 grand on crypto in the space of 6 months. I turned £800 in 16 grand. And I had a day at work where I was just like day trading cryptocurrency, and I made like 6 or 7 grand in like 2 hours. And I remember thinking, is this real? And Dan's already quit his job at this point, and he's working on it full time, and he's getting a little bit antsy and impatient with me, rightly so, because he's fucking rolled the dice. He's risked everything, and I hadn't. And he's like, bro, you're gonna fucking quit your job and work on this with me or not? Like, what's going on? And I made that money in that evening. And I was like, fuck it. Handed my notice in the same day, cashed out all my crypto, paid off my 15 grand's worth of car debt and all this other shit that I had, credit cards, just bullshit. And I started Otter with Dan on a completely clean slate. Lo and behold, come January, crypto crashed big time. Bitcoin went from like 20K down to like 2K, and I could not have gotten out at a more sweeter time. And I kind of look at that back at that moment as like it was very pivotal to my career, because if I had been a little bit more greedy and kept hold of it a bit longer, so many other scenarios could have happened. And this might not have got the attention it deserved. I might have not left my job. I might have started this with loads of debt, which would have been really stressful, because after I left, I went from being on 32K a year, which is just over 2.5, to like 2.2 grand a month take home. And when I was full time at Otter, I was paying myself £950 a month for the first year, and my rent was 550 quid in this small pocket. Like it was like a luxury uni room essentially. It was just like a bed and an ensuite. And yeah, I was getting paid 950, 550 went to rent, 100 to the car, insurance, all this other shit. Some months I literally couldn't afford to feed myself. I would have to go and buy discounted bread from the co-op. I was crazy skint. But here's the thing. I was so fucking happy. I was so happy because for the first time in my life, I had achieved something that had just felt like a fairy tale. I was working for myself. I was running my own company. We had clients coming in. And sure, I wasn't making a lot of money. I was making terrible money, but I could get a haircut any time of the day that I wanted, and I didn't have to ask any fucker for permission to do it. If I wanted to go get a haircut at 2:30, I could just go. If I wanted to not work the Friday and work a Saturday, if I wanted to just have a day off, like I didn't have to ask anyone for permission. Everything was run by me. I didn't do that. I didn't have any time off because I loved doing it. But like just the idea, the freedom behind, like for the first time in my life, everything felt a lot more in my control. And it was amazing. And it's just so funny because I'm so inherently motivated to earn, I think. Like my motivation is to earn. I don't really have love for materialistic things. I like cars. I drive a Volvo, but like I don't care about having like a fancy watch or nice clothes or anything like that. I like to earn because I like the freedom that money can allow me to have. And I think that's my biggest motivation. And I'm being transparent with you because I think that's kind of key. And it's really, really interesting when I look back at that moment, because me, Ben, who was so interested in cash and money and making money, was so happy earning 950 a month, because it was money that I'd earned myself, and it was money that I'd earned from figuring all this sort of shit out with Dan. And it was magical. And I just think it's really funny to think like that even though I thought my motivations were all just around cash, there was something deeper there of like, you did it, Ben. You've done something that maybe you doubted that you could do, and other people doubted you could do, and you did it. But now that's when the real work begins, because starting a company is the easy part. The hard part is running a company and growing it, because every day is just a firefight. But what I learned was it's a consistency, it's an input game. So that the first year was really cool. We ended up getting some sort of weird retainer with this IT company where we would take PDFs. This is in like 2018, PDFs, and we would then recreate them in PowerPoint by hand. So if there was like a box that said like tech, we would then have to write a box in PowerPoint. And I would spend hours a day doing that for his company, but we got paid like our company was getting paid like 2-3 grand a month doing that, which obviously like turned the lights on and kept me and Dan getting paid and other stuff like that, which was just really cool. Like I didn't mind doing it. I was just happy to do it because I was working with my best mate. We were in a co-working space. Our time was our own. We thought we were the fucking kings of the world, right? And then I went on a date with this girl who was she's a really, really nice girl. She actually became really good friends. And she was like, "Oh, this is work that I have at the National Trust, and you guys should pitch for it. You guys should put something in for it." We were like, "Okay, we never made a fucking pitch before. Like, what the hell do we do?" And she's like, "Oh, can you maybe like make like a mood board or something?" And Dan was like, "Fuck that! I'll make a mood video." And Dan, if you're watching this, that mood video Dan made was arguably one of the best videos he's ever made. It was just such a good video. He'd like just pulled Shutterstock image like video like offline, and then but like I can't even remember it, but I remember just watching it and thinking, "Fucking hell, Dan, they're gonna love this," and they did. And the girl, she was like, "No one else who's pitched for this has put anywhere near as much effort in for it. I think you're gonna win it. Can you give us a quote for the job and a contract?" And I was like, I had no idea what to quote at this point, like literally no idea. Up until that point, like we'd done like a £400 video for some circus, right? So I was like, yeah, of course we can do that for you out of interest, just so I, come in a bit clearer. What's the budget that you're kind of thinking around? And it was 30K, and I remember thinking that's a lot of money. And it was a 14-part docu-series, 2 locations, well, 1 location per month for 10 months in a row. And each location had 2 separate National Trust sites where we would go and film like a 4 to 5 minute documentary of like one of the workers there who had done something amazing and been quite inspirational. And yeah, she said it was 30K. I put a quote in for like 29,560. Like it just ironically came in a little bit lower. And lo and behold, it got signed off and we were in. And I was like, holy shit balls, Dan, we've just added like 30 grand to our yearly revenue. This is crazy. And we still had no idea what we were doing. I mean, we were shooting audio with shotgun mics on top of the DSLR, biblically wrong stuff, right? And we didn't, Dan's drone license hadn't come in yet. So we brought on a drone pilot called Martin, and he was great fun. So we had so much fun. Those first 2 shoots where Dan didn't have his drone license, we were just renting cars, shooting amazing stuff. It was just like, I couldn't believe how quickly my life had turned around from being like in an IT job that I just hated and was so uninspired by. And then within the space of like 5-6 months, I'd paid off all my debt and I was on a beach in Pembrokeshire shooting for the National Trust. And I barely still understood how a camera worked. Like I remember the amount of times Dan had to explain the difference between aperture and ISO to me. And I think I put a story on my Instagram and it was like me led on the beach in Pembrokeshire with my Canon 1300D and a 70-200 f4, one of Dan's lenses. And I was led down on the beach with the camera on my legs. And I literally just put the caption on my story, like, I used to work in IT. And I remember I was just like, fucking hell, man, this is me. This is like what's happening. Um, and it's funny, like telling this story now, I guess, to a camera or to you guys. And it's like, it's just, it's kind of inspiring to think that what I achieved, because like it all happened so fast. Anyway, we do that project Menti. Year goes past. End of our first financial year. I think we made like 98 grand, just shy of 100. And there was another video company that Dan and I really looked up to. They were called Brother Film. I really loved those guys. We thought that the work they produced was just so sick. And they had a Land Rover Defender as their like company van. And me and Dan were like, Instead of paying ourselves more salary, we're just like, let's buy a fucking Defender and just wrap it black, tint all the glass, put Otter on it, black alloys, black tires, and just make it look like a fucking wagon. And it was. I mean, before the logo branding went on, it looked like an arms dealer car. And I shit you not, people used to say to me, like, what do you do? And I used to think I could literally say drugs or arms dealing, and it would be very believable. Anyway, we had that truck, and that like built Otter up a lot more, because within town people became very aware of, like, that's a black kitted out Defender with OTTR works on it. What does that mean? And it just put us on the map a lot more, and it made us feel like a lot, I guess, kind of cool, right? And that story goes on and on and on. And I think a year later, we had an email from Havas Helia, the marketing company I used to work at. He was like, "Oh, hi, Ben, I've seen your content on LinkedIn," because that's kind of what I was doing for outreach at the time, for like lead acquisition. And they were after a video, and they wanted us to do vox pops for people in Swindon, ask them about their credit score. And I was like, yep, let's fucking do it. This is going to be kind of a full circle moment for me here, because I used to work there, I left, and now they're hiring my company. That's kind of cool, right? In a roundabout way. And I remember being so excited that I sent the quote off for £1,800, and I accidentally added an extra zero, and I set the quote at 18 grand. And she swiftly came back, and she's like, "Is this supposed to be 1,800?" And I was like, "Yes, sorry. I did not have the balls to go and say it's 18K." And I think they would have laughed me out of the room if I'd had. Um, anyway, they give us the job. Me and Dan go into Swindon to do some vox pops. We're like, great. Like, we're starting to get more and more like 4-figure work, more than a grand work. We start asking people in Swindon town centre about their credit score, and you can imagine the amount of times we got told to fuck off. And so we literally had to pull in friends from every single company that we knew, including my parents, that we could ask about their credit score. And so that's what we did. And then we made the video. And I don't know if they ended up using it or not, but we made it. And Dan had to go to Havas's office and speak about, and like edit in front of them and stuff. But yeah, crazy, crazy times. And then we can fast forward to COVID. Obviously, COVID kind of came out in China that December, whatever year it was. And then come the 2nd of March, we hired our first employee, Joss. And a week later, we went into lockdown, and Joss hadn't been employed long enough for him to get furlough. So we were like, I didn't want to be a tight bastard and say, well, I can't pay you. So we literally paid Joss his salary for like 4 months. We had no work to give him, just because we couldn't put him on furlough. And I remember at the time I just started playing World of Warcraft loads, because I was like, the whole world shut down. Maybe there's editing jobs we could do, but God knows how to find them at this point. And everyone got put on furlough anyway. So, I don't need to explain that time to you. It's just a weird time where people did whatever they wanted. Come out of COVID, huge marketing boom. All of a sudden, all these marketing departments just had so much marketing budget to spend, and boy, did they spend it. And I think that year we made, instead of like being at 100K, we made like 240. Me, Dan, and Joss. And then the year after that, March after that, we moved into our own office space, which was really, really, really cool. It was like 1,000 square foot office. And I remember like looking at Dan when we had our branding put up on the panels. I remember looking at Dan and saying like, this is big time now. We're not just driving a car around. We're not in like a small co-working space or a small office above a bar. We've got our own office, like dedicated to Otto. Like, our name was on the door of the building and for the business park. And we put in a 9-meter wide cyclorama. We had our own podcast studio, a meeting room. We had our own kit room with a lock cage. We had a massive office with standing desks. And it was like, I started as an agency here. It was crazy. And then that happened in March. Come August, we hired a guy called Max. Max came on board like a month later. And Max basically re-envisioned our entire cinematography route. And it was really cool. And that was our 4th employee. Then we had loads of sporadic employees of 5 Like our fifth employee, we went through like six of them, like none of them just kind of fitted or worked. And we realized that the four unit we had was just spectacular. Um, and while all this is going on, we're just building our brand name up. We're building X, Y, and Z up. We're speaking to bigger and better clients, more corporate, landing huge retainers. And, I learned some really valuable lessons in that time. One of them being that I was looking at our highest paid clients and the clients that were paying us the most consistently. And it was the clients that had been around the longest. It wasn't like it was very rare to get a client come in and just start paying you fucking loads of money. Although it did happen, it wasn't like a common thing. But the longer the time frame went with a client and we worked well together, the more and more budget they would start throwing at us because I guess the more trust that came from it. And one of the first clients we worked for was a cybersecurity company, and we charged them like £250 for some event video. And then in the like second or third last year that I was Otter, I think the second last year, we had like a six-figure retainer with them to do event stuff, photography, video, headshots. Just like we were basically like an agency on tap for them, which I really didn't mind because it was so much money from one client. And then, I was hitting six figures from one client and I could literally outsource most of the work to the employees, Joss and Max. So it was a very cushy kind of arrangement. And I knew they were getting a lot of value out of it as well. Because they trusted us and we worked with them so long. And also cybersecurity companies of that size, when they approach an agency, they just get fucking real tough. And yeah, it was a very cool time. Otter was blooming. We were doing like loads of content on LinkedIn. And a lot of our work came from LinkedIn, to be honest. I didn't really understand the theory behind it at the time. I was just posting content. And Dan was DMing people, and then it kind of just worked. And then we had crazy good organic referrals and crazy good testimonials from clients as well. And we ended up working, like, the ways that in which we got work from bigger companies was just crazy. Like, we landed GWR because we ended up doing a free video for this woman who ran this council run event, and I didn't think anything of it. And then she's like, "Oh, I should introduce you to my husband." And we were like, "Okay, cool." And then we ended up having a meeting with her husband, and he's like the head of marketing for GWR. And we were like, and GWR gets a lot of slack online for being late and all this sort of stuff, but the brand is really fucking cool. It's a very cool heritage brand, nice colors. And everyone who worked there, just like, they were quite cool people. A lot older than Dan and I, but they were very cool. And that was a really cool gig. And a lot of our work came from that. Like, I realized that if you want to grow a really good company, you just have to be in the game long enough. You just exist long enough, you do good work, you meet more people, and there's things you can do to speed that up big time, like client acquisition systems and flywheels and all this sort of stuff that I research and now understand and implement myself for my clients. And yeah, man, it's just like the longer you're in the game and the longer you apply these systems for, it just compounds like crazy. Um, and then I started having these feelings where I was like, I think it was around the same time that I had my daughter, Yuna, and I got married. And I was thinking, like, I'm getting paid really well. I'm driving a Tesla that's wrapped like in blue. It's just a really cool car. Um, not to sound arrogant, I'm very like, I'm very, I don't care about talking about money. I know people find it a bit awkward, but like I was on like double the national average salary. So I was getting paid really well. I was in a really good place. In terms of like wage for my age bracket, I was in like the top 1%. Let's put it that way for my age. And I was very unfulfilled and I was increasingly unhappy. And I fought with this feeling for a long time because I was like, are you an idiot? Are you really going to throw away what you've built with Dan? And what would you even do? And I just ignored these thoughts for ages. And I never really allowed myself to actually think about them. And then there was one weekend in February 2024, this year, where I actually allowed myself to have thoughts. I allowed myself to like, okay, I'm getting this feeling again. I'm getting this thought of not being fulfilled, not wanting to do this anymore. And I allowed myself to kind of think about it deeply. And within 2 days, I realized that I had to leave because I wasn't happy anymore. And I was turning 30. And, I realized I still have loads of time left, but it was more of like, I don't want to wake up and be 40 and still having these feelings and doing these things. Um, and so that Monday after that weekend of having those thoughts, I walked into the office and I asked Dan to go for a walk with me. And I told him that I wanted to leave. Um, and Dan, fair enough to him, took it very graciously, as he always does. He's a very stoic guy. Dan's really nice. And I said, look, man, this isn't what I want to do anymore. And I'd like us to try and work something out about how I can exit. And the last thing I want to do is to see Otter fail. I'd want to get paid for everything I put into the company and everything the company has been built to, but equally, I want to see it succeed after I go. That was very important to me and still is. And then over the course of that, like February to July, we figured everything out, buyout, all that sort of good stuff. And then on the end of July was my last day. And it was a very surreal experience. I thought I would feel a lot more, but I didn't really feel anything. I thought I would be more emotional. I thought I would, I don't know, shed a tear or feel about things in a certain way, or maybe even have second thoughts, but I didn't feel anything. And I think that was worse because I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel that those 8 years meant something. And of course they did, but I guess I was just looking for something more. But that's life, isn't it? It's like, you don't really know what you're going to feel and when. And my goal at the time after Otter was to go into property, which I did. But doing property in a 9 to 5 versus doing it as an investment thing are two very separate titles. And doing it as the investment thing was really fun. I'm still doing that now. But as a 9 to 5, I just quickly realized I fucking hated it because one of my biggest skills and one of my biggest levers and leverage is speed. I'm very quick when it comes to entrepreneurialism. And speed and property are two things that do not mix very well, if at all. So I did that for 2 months, and I remember breaking down in this exact moment, crying because like my third deal that I had like done in property in a row had fallen through, or like my eighth. It was just like constant knocks. And I was under more and more pressure to start making money. Obviously, I had my buyout money, which was great, which I was using to buy property and give me a bit of a runway. But deal after deal after deal just kept falling through. And I was like, fucking hell, man, it's been 2 months and I've got nothing to show for it. And I remember just sitting in this chair and crying to my wife. And she was like, you need to do something. This isn't right. I think it's time that you got a job. And I remember being sat in this chair in her arms and thinking, how the fuck did I fall so high so quickly? Like running an agency, making that much money to down here where I am now. And I realized very quickly it's because I just didn't find property interesting, or like there was no like huge crossover of my skills and my talents into it. And I realized I found the experience quite humbling. At least that's what Amber told me it was. It was a humbling experience, which it was. And then I was like, I think this is like September now. And I'm like, okay, well, what the fuck am I going to do? Am I really going to apply for a job? And like for 2 days, I made like a CV and sent it out to recruiters and shit. I remember looking at the wall thinking, hey, even if you get offered an 80 grand job, are you actually going to take it? Probably not. Because you don't, it just, for me, it was so morally not me. Going back to reading Laptop Millionaire and being that inspired by Casey Neistat, I wasn't about to chuck all of that inspiration and hard work and skill into working 9 to 5 again. And within 20 minutes, my brother had phoned me randomly, and he's like, "Oh, bro, have you heard about this thing called School?" And I was like, "Oh, I follow like Hormozi and stuff. Hormozi is like one of my Idols online. I think he's a marketing goat. I think the guy's awesome, and he's given me so much value over the years. Hormozi, if you're watching this, hello. Come. Um, and Hormozi started this like online communities platform where you can educate people and get people in the community, and you can make money and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, okay, cool, that sounds quite interesting. I could teach creatives how to start their own company and make money. Like that was my forte, Otter. Like over the years at the company, I became less and less in a creative role and more in a project management, client liaison, business generation role. Like I got like qualifications from the government to understand more about business and all this other shit. But that's what I love doing. The project management, the client acquisition, looking at reports, making money, numbers, and understanding the whole business side. That's what I fell in love with. I started to like cameras, but I fell in love with the business. And I think that's why I started to feel a bit unfulfilled at the end, because it just wasn't challenging enough for me. So started a school community, did some courses on client acquisition, marketing, positioning, got loads of good feedback. People loved it. And I was doing all that and I was like, man, this just feels very like, it's like, I feel like I'm getting pieces together, but it's not quite clicking. But I felt like I was on the right path. And it was very interesting because as soon as I had that conversation with Tim, my brother, about school and everything that happened with property and what I was going to do, and he said, well, why didn't you look into being like a coach? Like people would love to get your experience and how you grew. You went from not understanding cameras through to a $500,000 company per year. And I was like, oh yeah, huh, that's quite simple. That's quite logical. Well, why didn't I think of that? But you never do. And so I did. I was like, okay, well, maybe I should explore coaching a little bit. And I took on some clients completely free, like people that I kind of knew, to help them with their stuff. And I just fucking loved it. I just loved it. And I realized from coaching, there was so much I knew that people didn't. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but I meant it in a way that there was so much I knew that I could help people with. And there were so many gaps in people's knowledge that I could fix for them. And it became extremely fulfilling. And for the first time since the end of July this year, I felt like I was on the right path. I felt good about my decision to leave Otter. I felt like, things are starting to click into place now. And now at the end of the year, 29th of December, 3:53 p.m., I need to go to the gym. And I've just signed 8 clients to work with me in January. It's January the 1st, going forward for 3 months. Paid clients, covering all my bills, my expenses, my ad spend, everything. And it's amazing because I feel like I've made it again. I feel like I'm that guy who's made the £950 a month, can't afford to live, but is loving every minute of it again. And that's something I haven't tasted in 8 years. And it's wonderful because it's really solidifies my feeling of this is what I want to do, and this is my passion, and this is my goal. Like I want to help as many people as I can achieve their dreams. And, being at Otter and being around creators all the time, I've realized that a creative person who really found the business side interesting was quite rare. Like what I found interesting about this side was rare. And I realized that there's so many creatives out there, especially videographers, who are really good at making films, who don't understand the business side at all. Like I'm not the best filmmaker, but I'm pretty good at the business side. You can tell from this. Like I'm not even shooting this on a DSLR or a camera. This is my iPhone cinematic mode with a Hollyland lapel mic, which I'm going to run through Adobe Enhancer, and then maybe whack like a crazy iPhone light over the top of it. Like I'm not the best filmmaker, but I understand filmmaking. I understand the value it brings to clients and how you sell it. And those are 2 skills that have served me very well. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here. And now I'm spending the holiday season reflecting with my family, reading some really cool books, and getting the program ready to work with everyone in the new year and get them insane results. And I'm looking forward to making another one of these videos, December 2025, and talking about how many people I've helped, talking about how much money I've made, talking about the holidays I've taken the wife and kid on, and telling you how fulfilled I am. Cool. I'm going to sign off. Thanks for listening.